Hi, Shivani.
Hello, Swati ji, welcome. Great you have come.
Hi Swati, good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Should I start, sir?
Sure.
Very good evening and special evening to all of you, all the great faculty in front of me, all the participants. I welcome you on the great evening, weekend evening, and the topic of today, global trends in internal audit, a look ahead. And first of all, I would like to introduce the great personality, the chairman of Internal Audit Standard Board of ICAI, Honorable Sri Charanjit Singh Nandaji, Central Council Member of ICI. First of all, I would like to introduce his brief profile in front of all of us. So, friends, when I go through the profile of sir, then then I understand that this profile is rather need a lengthy topic. I think this should be a topic instead of a profile. And let's friends start. Mr. Charanjit Singh Nandaji, Central Council Member of ICI, elected 25th Council of ICI, and presently Chairman Internal Audit Standard Board and Digital Accounting Standard Accounting and Assurance Board, and Vice Chairman of the Banking, Financial Services and Insurance Committee. He was the member Quality Review Board set up by the Government of India, was the member the Central Council, the Institute of Chartered Accountant of India from 2004 to 2016. He was the chairman of Committee on Internal Audit of the Institute of, and also the chairman of the Committee for Member in Industry of the ICAI. He was the chairman of Women Member Empowerment Committee of the ICAI. He was the vice chairman of the Committee on Public Finance and Government Accounting, was the chairman of Professional Development Committee, the ICAI, was the chairman of the Committee for Cooperative and NPO Sector, chairman of the Research Committee, chairman of the Committee on Banking, Insurance and Pension, the chairman of the Committee on Finance Market and Investor Protection, was the member of the SEBI Advisory Committee on Primary Market 2007 to 2010, member of the SEBI Advisory Committee on Mutual Fund 2007 to 2010, has represented ICAI on SEBI Committee on Disclosure and Accounting Standard, was the convener of the expert group constituted by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India on investor protection, was member of the Southern Asian Federation of Accountant Committee on Professional Accountants in Business, was the chairman of the Continuing Professional Education Committee, Public Relationship Committee, Committee on Internal Audit of the ICAI, was a member of NIRC of the ICAI in India for 2 terms, 1998 to 2001 and 2001 to 2004. Was the chairman NIRC of the ICI 2002 to 2003. Was the treasurer 1998 to 1999 and 1999 to 2000 and 2001 to 2002. Was the chair of the following committee, a table given in the profile: executive, career counseling, public relation, member grievance, social gathering, sports, continuing professional committee, and insurance committee. So it was a so brief profile of Honorable Charanjit Singh Nandaji, and I invite for inaugural start Charanjit Singh Nandaji. Ji sir, Honorable Nanda sir, welcome.
A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are back yet with another astounding, exciting session on internal audit. CA Jagdish Dhamija and CA Bhupendra Dikshit, who represent the Panipat branch, they are the host branch. We have 3 of our very revered speaker, Ms. Swati Sharma, who's lead InfoSec Officers Global Policy of Amazon. She would speak on PCI, DSS, and security audit for payment systems in India. She has spoken on various occasions, and she's one of the very astounding and one of the very learned speakers. The second speaker of the day, whom I also love listening, Madam Miss Bhavani Joyce. She is co-head of internal audit and SOX Infosys Limited. She has a deep insight into the subject and would speak on the psychology of risk management. The third speaker, my younger brother, CA Gaurav Mishra, who works for a Big Four, would speak on digitization in internal audit. Ladies and gentlemen, it is going to be a very exciting session. I'm sorry, I'm traveling. I'm sitting in one of my friend's office, Mr. Deepak Kapoor, past chairman of Karnal branch, with so many chairmen, past chairmen. So I won't be able to devote much time, but I wish this conference, today's seminar, a great success. I can say only one thing, that profession will go high when the intelligence of membership to hone their technical skills is at the highest level. I want to tell you, there's a saying in English that behind every war that is won are screams of orphans and cries of widows. Behind every man who has been turned into a successful professional, a deep rooted instinct to learn and, more importantly, assimilate what can be of great benefit to him. And today's session, I'm so happy we are nearing the end of this year, but every Saturday we had a session on internal audit, and every fortnightly we had a session on internal audit standards. The profession and internal audit both are at the top notch, and I wish all great success in times to come. Thank you, Dikshitji, for calling me. Over to you for your further proceedings. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, sir, for the opening remarks and great remarks and motivating remarks, rather, I can say. And thank you so much, sir, for giving your time. And now I invite the acting secretary of the Panipat branch, C.A. Jagdish Dhamija, formal inaugural of the program. Ji Jagdish, sir, over to you. जगदीश जी आप अनम्यूट कर लीजिए जी जी जगदीश
हेलो am I audible
जी सर
okay thanks ye Bhupender Dikshit ji first of all I would like to congratulate the whole team of internal audit standard board of ICI for choosing such an important topic for today's session. I on behalf of the chairman of Panipat branch thanks to all the dignitaries to giving us a chance to host this wonderful program. I am very thankful to CA Charanjit Singh Nanda ji, Chairman of Internal Audit Standard Board of ICI, and CA Gyanchand Mishra ji, Vice Chairman of the board, for inviting very eminent speakers today. Swati Sharma ma'am, she is Lead Information Security Officer Global Policy in Amazon, and Miss Bhavani Joyce from Infosys Limited, and our member of ICI, CA Gaurav Mishra ji. Friends, as you all know that there are 7 continentals, but one common language, that is our language of accounting and auditing. So it becomes very important to be more aware about global trends in internal audit. And today with these eminent speakers, I'm sure that we are going to learn a lot of knowledge today. So I'm thankful for this opportunity to Panipat branch. Thanks, Bhupender ji.
Thanks, Honorable Jagdish sir. And now I must congratulate to all the Internal Accounting Standard Board of ICI. And first of all, I would like to invite Ms. Swati Sharma ma'am, who is the lead InfoSec officer Global Policy Amazon. And here the brief profile of ma'am. मैम सबसे पहले डिग्री बता देता हूँ CSP, CISA, CRISC, CISSP, CISM, PCI, QSA, ISO 27001. So the profile, an information security professional by choice and trainer/teacher at heart. She has over 14 years of experience in IT audit, payment security, HIPAA information security, PCI DSS and privacy and risk management, and has handled many information system audit. Has led compliance program at leading payment gateways, banks, third-party processor, IT companies, and BPOs in different geographical locations, including India, US, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, Morocco, Singapore, Philippines, and UK. She has been invited speaker for many international forums, including PCI SSC, Community Meeting, ISACA, Delhi Chapter and Cisco Platform, ex-director, SSO, ISC2, Bangalore Chapter, and has been featured on Pen Test Cover magazine. She has been contributing in various security magazine and blogs on regular basis. My mouth starting pain when I read a foreign degree and a foreign language. So I welcome Swati ma'am, Honorable Swati ma'am, to start the deliberation. Ji welcome. Yeah. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for such a generous introduction, I would say. So before we start our session, I would just like to give an introduction that I come from information security background. I started my journey in audits, technical security audits, and I have worked with number of very intelligent CAs. So I understand the logic of this profession and the community, and I really appreciate the intelligence that everybody brings on table, and that's why I have been associated with different auditing groups so that we can keep connected and we can talk about some of the topics on regular basis, and we can exchange the different knowledge that we gather from the different words. With this, I would like to share the PPT so that we can start the discussion. Let me know if it's visible now, and I'll share the PPT now as well. So please let me know if the PPT is
Yes, ma'am. It is visible.
Okay. So to keep the presentation in line with the theme that is planned by ICAI this time, that audits and global trends, right? So I thought I'll start with something which is like little bit of global flavor and which has impact in India as well. So I decided to talk about payment card industry data security standard. This is one of the industry standard for the payment card entities which are dealing with payment cards. And when I say payment cards, I'm talking about both. I'm talking about credit cards, debit cards, prepaid cards, any card which has your Visa and MasterCard logo, to keep it very simple. So this data that we are going to talk about, it's very sensitive in nature because of two reasons. One, it's a payment data, which means the financial element is involved there. And the another factor which makes this data sensitive is that payment card information or the cardholder data is also overlapping with your personal data or PII data, personal identifiable information. And because of that, a lot of hackers, a lot of malintended threat actors are interested in this data. And to protect this data, every card brand had different programs to secure this data. And at later point of time, they realized that they have to collaborate and they have to form an industry standard against which organizations can be audited. So I'll not go in a lot of details. Generally, when we talk about PCI, because it's a subject where a lot of technical depth is involved, the discussion can be a little lengthy. But for this session particular, I have kept it on little high level, and I'll not go in much detail until unless if there is a particular question. So if there is any question, we can answer that. So I'll start with very basic. When you look at your card, there are some basic informations which are involved. In the front side of your card, you can see your 16-digit card number, which is also known as primary account number. Please do not confuse it with your PAN that you use for tax. That is permanent account number. This is primary account number. Generally, it is a 16-digit number. In MX card, you may see 15-digit or some other variation. You also see EMV chips, which are there in recent cards. And then you see holograms, your cardholder name, expiry date. The data elements which are highlighted in red, they are actually protected under PCI DSS, and this information is in the scope of this standard that I am talking about. At the back side of the card, you can see magnetic stripe, the black color stripe, which contains all the information for swipe transaction. And you also have signature level, and then there is a 3-digit number which you use for your online card transactions or mail order transaction, where you can't swipe or present your card actually. So that those transactions are called card not present transactions. To quickly move on, for any transaction that you have to do, these are the minimum things that you need to complete the transaction. So you need primary account number, you need EMV chip. You can actually insert the chip and then transaction will be completed. And then If it is a swipe machine, you can swipe magnetic stripe and the transaction will be completed. For online transaction, you may need expiry date and other details, including CVV2. I'll not go in this detail. It's very important to understand ecosystem. So I have been using term payment brands, what exactly payment brands are, and where they are sitting in this hierarchy. So payment brands are your entities which have proprietary of credit cards and debit cards. So they have these first 2 digits of your card number, they own it. And then they also have this connectivity. When I say connectivity, what does it mean? So when you use your Citibank card on HDFC Bank, how this transaction flows, right? How HDFC will send your detail to your Citibank card. This happens through a network which is provided by these payment brands. There are 5 payment brands, international payment brands, I should say: MasterCard, Visa, American Express, JCB, and Discover. Then there are banks, right? Banks will provide, so banks will have 2 roles here. Banks will issue cards to users like me and you, and they will also provide the POS machine or the terminals where you swipe to the merchants. So they have relationship with the cardholders, and then they have relationship with the merchants. Where they have relationship with merchants, those are called acquiring banks. Where they have relation with cardholders like you and me, they are called issuing banks. And issuing banks and acquiring banks may be different banks, right? You can swipe your card on any POS terminal that your merchant is giving you. And then there are merchants. Merchants, generally, they provide you service or product against which they accept credit card or debit card. And then there is a very critical entity or ecosystem player which is there, which is called third-party service provider. These are not merchants, these are not banks, but they are providing services to any of these. So, for example, you have booked a card on Indigo, right? And you have purchased ticket from them. Indigo is your merchant because you have paid them. But let's assume that you want to cancel your ticket or you want to upgrade your ticket, for example. Now you want to do it on a call. So you will call Indigo, and Indigo may not be a company which owns the call center. So your calls may land up in a call center which is running by IBM, let's for example. So IBM will take your card number, complete the transaction on the system, whichever is connecting them to the Indigo airline. And in this entire ecosystem, Indigo is your merchant. If you're using Citibank, Citibank will be your issuer. And call center running by IBM, IBM will be the service provider. And if your card has logo of MasterCard, MasterCard will come into picture because of the connectivity. So service provider can be anyone who is providing backend services. It may be a technical service, it may be a data center, it may be a call center, it may be a software development company. So they may be providing any service in the entire ecosystem. And we'll talk more about this ecosystem in a few minutes. So as I explained, service providers can provide services to any other entity. It can be merchant, service provider itself, or payment brands. So let's take one example. So you have Citibank card. You went to Shopper Stop for shopping, and you have shared this card or you swipe this card on Shopper Stop machine. Shopper Stop will may have a ICICI Bank terminal. So now, because the terminal is provided by ICICI Bank, this merchant will send the information to ICICI Bank. Now, ICICI Bank has no information about your card, right? Because they don't know if you are a genuine customer, you have a fraudulent transaction, nothing. They don't know anything about your card, your Citibank card. What they know is that first 2 digits of that transaction or the card belongs to Visa or MasterCard or what payment brand. So based on first 2 digits of that card number, they will route the transaction to MasterCard or Visa. And because MasterCard is the proprietor, they will know to whom this first 6 digit was given, and based on that, they will identify whether this transaction belongs to Citicard or some other bank, and they will send it to the respective issuing bank. And once it lands to Citibank, which is issuing bank in this case, will know everything about you, right? They will know whether it's a genuine card, whether you have provided right PIN or not, whether you have right transaction limit on your card or not. So everything they will know. And once they will complete the transaction, whether they reject or accept, the same response will go to merchant, and based on that, merchant will accept or reject your service or product that you are trying to buy. This entire thing happens in 8 seconds. So I may be explaining it in length, but actually this happens within 8 seconds. So if you look at the Visa operating guideline, it happens within 8 seconds. Similar transaction takes care if you are not swiping or inserting your card, if you are doing transaction on an online commerce or online company. In this case, there can be one entity called gateway, and that gateway may be involved in the entire transaction as well. The rest of the flow remains same. So what happens when you swipe your card or when you present your card? So there is a step called authentication. In authentication, your issuing bank will verify your identity based on card number, and the PIN or CVV2, they will verify whether you are a right owner of that card or not. Then there is a step called authorization. Authorization decides whether you can complete that transaction or not. I may hold a Citibank card, but I may not be eligible to buy a Lamborghini with that, right? Because I may not have right funds for in the card. Let's take example. Then there is a step called clearing, where all exchange happens about the batch file between acquiring bank and issuing bank to settle the transaction. So first step is sharing the information. Information is shared in clearing step. And then settlement happens when actual money is being settled, which takes generally 2 to 3 days. Recently, you may have heard of news about T+1 settlement cycle. So internationally, there is a trend, or there are system upgrades which will support T+1 settlement nowadays. So a lot of people ask me that, okay, why should I care about the non-compliance against PCI DSS? First of all, I want to understand what is PCI DSS. So PCI DSS stands for Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. That's called PCI DSS. PCI DSS is industry standard. It's not regulatory requirement, or it's not a law of land, right? So it's not like a GDPR, or it's not like a RBI regulation. It's an industry norm. If you don't comply with it, Visa and MasterCard may put some restrictions or fines on you. So there can be fines if you're violating the compliance. There can be penalties. They can stop you from transacting the online transactions or the card transactions. And then there can be brand damage, right? If, for example, if someone comes to know that particular merchant has breached 6 million card numbers, obviously the brand damage will be there. If these PCI DSS is overlapping with GDPR, for example, you are doing business in EU, because PCI or the payment card information is personal data also, the GDPR will also come into picture. So for example, if you're violating PCI, automatically you will be fined for GDPR. Similarly, in India, if you look for the acquiring guidelines, it is mandatory by RBI to comply with PCI DSS for the regulated entity. And I'll talk more about it a little bit. So there'll be regulatory requirement as well, because RBI has enforced it indirectly. So in certain geographies, regulatory bodies or legal entities have enforced PCI DSS indirectly. So not meeting that will have furthermore obligation indirectly. Okay, so who has built this PCI DSS, right? People ask me that, okay, from where it come, right? How I will know that, who is managing it, who is behind it. So all these payment brands, they came together because it was interest for them. They came together and they formed a body called PCISSC, Payment Card Industry Security Standard Council, which is an independent industry standard body. They only provide oversight for development of these standards. They also train auditors. So there is very interesting piece in this. Any auditor cannot do PCI DSS audit. So that's not allowed actually. You need to have a license called PCI QSA license. Payment Card Industry Qualified Security Assessor. And you need to get this license from PCISSC. Your employees also need to get certificate, they have to qualify certain exam, and then only these audits can be conducted. So if someone says that I can sign your audit report, answer is no. PCI audits can be only signed by PCI QSA companies and their employees. It's not available for all other auditors. So even if I am CISA, if I'm not QSA, I can't sign these reports. So there is a specific qualification required to do PCI DSS audits. PCI-SSE is responsible for data security standards. They are responsible for training and giving license to QSA companies, and for vulnerability scans to identify what are the security flaws in your organization. Automated scans are also allowed, and those entities are called ASV. So they do training and qualification exams for these entities. And they also invite different stakeholders, industry body, to update PCI standards on 3 years basis. So this is one of the important slides that when we talk about PCI DSS, the core data which is in scope is your 16-digit card number, your name, your expiry, and service code. You can store this data, but when it comes to sensitive authentication data, which includes your complete track data, the data which is present in the magnetic stripe, your CVV2 number, the 3-digit number which is printed, or your PIN that you enter while you complete the transaction, this data cannot be stored post authorization. So once the transaction is completed, entities can store 16-digit card number, but they cannot store CVV2 or PIN block. So that information need to be dropped. Even if encrypted, they can't store that information. So they can store cardholder data, which is left side, but they cannot store information which is listed in the right side of the screen. So next question, which is very interesting, that to whom this is applicable? Is it applicable throughout? Answer is no. It is only applicable for the entities which are storing, processing, transmitting PAN. Some of the PCI DSS requirement may be still applicable even if you are not doing any of these. If you are supporting or if you can impact security of an organization which is in PCI DSS scope, you may also come into picture. For example, I'm running a payment gateway and I'm onboarding merchants to complete these online transactions. This payment gateway company is hosted on AWS. Because it is hosted on AWS cloud, the underlying infrastructure will also come into picture. And AWS may not be directly storing, processing, and transmitting cardholder data, but because they're providing infrastructure, underlying infrastructure, they will also come into scope. So entities which are directly storing, processing, and transmitting card number, they are in scope. Entities which may be in scope, even if they are not doing any of this, if those entities are providing services, or they can impact the security of cardholder data environment. We have talked about storage requirements. So I'll quickly go on the next slide. That who enforces these compliance obligation, right? So please remember, PCI SSE doesn't enforce compliance. This compliance is enforced by Visa and MasterCard. They enforce it to the banks. And then banks will enforce it to the merchants or the service provider. So the enforcement start with the payment brands, and then further it is being obligated to banks, and then banks will enforce it to the connecting entities. Payment brands are responsible for tracking and enforcement of PCI DSS compliance. They are also responsible for penalties, fees, and compliance deadlines. They are also responsible for validation processes who need to be validated. They are also responsible for approval and posting of compliance entities. They are also responsible for level. I'll talk about what is this level. So they define that who is like doing lesser transaction, who is doing more transaction, and based on that, compliance levels are also changing. So they define the transaction and merchant levels as well. Payment brands are also responsible for any forensic investigation if there is any cardholder data, including account data, is compromised. So when we talk about PCI DSS has 6 domains. Within that 6 domain, they have listed out 12 requirements. And in these 12 requirements, there are approximately 350 plus security controls. These are mix of people, process, and technology. For example, the current version or the latest version, I should say, both the versions are relevant today, and entities can choose to be compliant on version 3.2.1 or version 4.0. Starting from April 2024, only version 4.2 will be available. As on date, both the versions are applicable and relevant. I'll talk more about version 4.0, which is more latest and relevant. So if you look at the requirements, first requirement talks about building and maintaining security or secure network and system. So first requirement talks about network layer security. It talks about installing and maintaining network security controls like firewalls, routers, your perimeter security. Second requirement talks about applying secure configuration of all system components. And in this all system component definition, your end devices, your servers, your application, network components, everything comes into picture. So it talks about how you should configure your devices, your servers, your applications. And it also talks about not using vendor default credential like admin, or some of these vendor default credentials and configuration should not be there. The second domain talks about protecting account data. And if you remember, account data combines your cardholder data and sensitive authentication data. It talks about protecting the account data while stored. And it talks about protecting cardholder data with a strong cryptography during transmission over open and public networks so that no one can intercept and see the data which is being transmitted. The third domain talks about maintaining a vulnerability management program, which talks about antivirus, patch management. It also talks about software development related security best practices. If you look at the fourth domain, it talks about restricting access to the system components and cardholder data by business need to know. So it talks about logical access control. Requirement 8 talks about your user account management, passwords, multi-factor authentication, who can access what. So it talks about your access, identity, password related controls. While requirement 9 talks about physical access related control, it talks about visitor management, your physical access related controls, including CCTV cameras, your employee access, how you dealt with your physical devices, your data which you have archived or stored for the backup, the physical copy of the data if you are storing. While requirement 10 and 11 talks about regularly monitoring and testing network, it talks about log and monitoring, enabling the audit trails. It also talks about enabling the file integrity monitoring solution so that no one is changing the data in unauthorized way. Requirement 11 talks about wireless scan. It talks about your vulnerability assessment. So vulnerability assessment is a exercise where you do a scan to identify vulnerabilities in your environment, the security flaws in your devices or your processes. Network penetration testing and application penetration testing is another requirement which is mandatory in requirement 11, which talks about trying to exploit the vulnerabilities that you have identified and see if those can be exploited. You can use those flaws to actually break the system. While requirement 12 talks about policies, procedures, it talks about NDAs, it talks about employee awareness, background check, exit processes. It also talks about incident management. It also talks about risk management and related things. So requirement 9 is like a fundamental or like a base of the entire PCI DSS where it talks about the documentation processes, where you have stacked other technical controls till requirement 1 to 11. I'll not talk about this. This is, I can talk about this if there is any question. Before I go to this slide, which talks about like, based on transaction, they have decided who need to do what. So if you are doing more transaction, over 6 million transaction, then you are level 1 merchant, which means you need to hire an external QSA company to do audit. But if you are doing lesser transaction, let's assume if you are doing transaction 20,000 to 1 million annually, it means you need not to hire a QSA company. You can do a self assessment and provide the SAQ document. This makes a lot of sense because if you like start imagining that people have to deploy network control, hardening, encryption, and all these controls, you can't imagine it that if you're like a person who is like just running a kirana shop, right? And they have this POS terminal, they have to abide with all those controls. Not possible, right? Because they may not be even getting the all cardholder data and all. While someone like Future Group or Shopper Stop, right, the large merchant chains, in those cases, the level one compliance makes sense, right? So there is risk definition, and based on the risk, the validation of the or the assessment methods will change. So this is all about the PCI DSS. I want to talk about certain aspects which are associated in the from the RBI perspective. So let's assume if you are doing business in India and if you are a payment company, let's assume that you are a company which is like BillDesk or which is like PayU, right? Which is onboarding merchants, and then it is providing you connectivity with the acquiring banks like HDFC and other banks. In this scenario, not only PCI will be applicable on you, there'll be n number of other requirements from the RBI perspective will be also applicable. And because of that, you also have to abide with RBI controls. And if you look at the PCI and RBI requirements, for example, PAPG requirements, which came in 2021, or payment security guidelines, which came in 2022, all these requirements are talking more about the confidentiality, integrity, and availability factor. While PCI DSS, more or less, it stands for your confidentiality factor. It talks about protecting the cardholder data, while it doesn't focus a lot on the availability factor or the integrity factor of your cardholder information. Based on that, if you're doing business in India, PCI DSS can be a good standard to cover the base control for confidentiality, and same controls can be inherited for some of the availability factor. And other controls need to be deployed to cover integrity and granular level of the availability to be compliant in the PCI from the RBI as well as from the PCI DSS perspective. With that, RBI also has come up with a data localization requirement, which has been very interesting. And especially global entities have been in little dilemma in last few years around the payment data localization aspect. So if there is a global organization which is doing payment related business in India, they have to abide with PCI DSS, RBI guidelines, as well as the data localization requirement, which means if they want to process the transaction outside India, they can do that. But the storage of the data has to be in India. So within 24 hours, they have to brought all the data back and they have to delete the foreign copy of the transaction. These entities can store the copy of the data if it is a cross-border transaction. If it is not a cross-border transaction, if it's a pure domestic transaction, the entire data need to be stored only in India. So this space is a little complicated and it's evolving from the audit and security perspective. And PCI DSS audits need to be completed every year. Similarly, RBI regulated entities, they also have to complete annual audits conducted by RBI. And you may also have to provide certain quarterly documents to the RBI on a regular basis. What I have observed based on the experience that being compliant with PCI DSS has helped organization in complying with RBI regulation because some of the fundamental controls and requirements will be in place because they have been PCI DSS compliant. With this, I would open the space for any question. If there is any question someone wants to ask, or if there is any point that someone want me to cover.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a nice and wonderful deliberation. And I think question abhi nahi hai koi bhi. And the presentation you shared, I think most attractive presentation, the graphical presentation, chart wise, very beautifully presented, ma'am. Congratulations to you, and thanks for kind words. And now I invite the second speaker of the today program, Miss Bhavani Joyce. Bhavani Joyce, ma'am. So I welcome Bhavani Joyce, ma'am. And I'm very delighted by heart. Okay, I'm speaking with today. I'm about or with the person who is connected with the Infosys. I think the brand Infosys, because the dream Infosys. My one of my dream. And now I'm reading the profile of Bhavani Joyce, ma'am. AVP and co-head of internal audit and SOX at Infosys, leadership and executive coach and trainer at the Evolving Way. Bhavani co-heads the internal audit and SOX function at Infosys Limited, headquartered in Bangalore, India. She has played a key role in driving transformation in internal audit through automation, analytics, and elevating the position of the internal audit team as value-adding business partners. She jointly led Infosys to win the IC Institute of Internal Auditor India (IIA) National Excellence Award in 2018, 2019, and 2021. She is an active governor of the IIA India Bangalore chapter and was also the president of the chapter for the financial year 2021. She recently pivoted from a full-time corporate life to a part-time role as co-head and has embarked on her journey as an executive and leadership coach and trainer with a vision to partner with the leaders, aspiring leaders and executives, in particular those in the audit and risk fraternities, on their individual and collective journey to personal and professional fulfillment through coaching and power skill training. Prior to Infosys, she was a director at Deloitte India's internal audit practice, having worked previously in the UK for 15 years, including as director of risk and assurance at Cancer Research UK, UK's the largest NGO, where she was responsible for leading the internal audit, risk management, and health and safety function. Bhavani has over 24 years of professional experience. She is a regular speaker on the interpersonal and human aspect of internal audit and risk management, as well as technical topic pertaining to the profession. In addition, she also speaks on the topic relating to mental fitness, resilience, executive presence, self-management, and leadership that have been tailored to address the increasing psychological challenge faced by the professional operating in today's disruptive business landscape. Ma'am, your profile is so much interesting, and I must congratulate you. So, I welcome Bhavani Joyce, ma'am, to start the deliberation. See, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Bhupinder ji. Okay, let me just share my slides. Give me a minute. Are my slides visible?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
So the topic I'm going to be sharing with all of you today is on the psychology of risk management. This is a topic that is very close to my heart. I think all across dimensions of business in life, psychology of how human beings think and operate matters, because we are all unique people and we bring that uniqueness to work. And risk is a very personal interpretation. There is no, I'll share some nuggets of research where it has been concluded there is no such thing as real or objective risk, because risk is riddled with emotional connect. It is riddled with perception, which is unique to each person's view of reality. And therefore, as auditors, we need to understand and appreciate that there is that part of human element that comes into risk management and internal audit. And if we can understand that, then we can also modify how we do our audits, how we relate to each other in the space of internal audit. With that objective, I would be sharing the content of my presentation today. So let me start by talking about internal audit and some key aspects of why I believe human psychology is very important to understand. This is one extract. It says, in any audit, the auditor perceives and recognizes the propositions or the arguments or the evidences in front of him for examination, collects evidence, evaluates the same, and on this basis formulates his or her judgment, which is communicated through his or her audit report. Now, two key words, two key phrases: perceives and recognizes, and judgment. To perceive and recognize something, first one has to take in that information through their senses. We all have the same 5 senses, but these 5 senses operate very differently for each person. And once we take in that information, we associate that information with our experiences, our memories, and everything. And therefore, it is all but obvious that perception is a very unique outlook for each person. And then we use that perception to form judgment. And judgment is an essential part of an internal auditor's role. And therefore, if judgment is based on perception, then judgment is also very individual and personal. And if we know how people do both of these things, perceive things and judge things, then we can appreciate better why two people don't see the same situation, the same evidence, the same experience the same way, and why sometimes in our roles as auditors, we need to be very open-minded about the interpretation. When somebody doesn't agree with us with an audit finding, rather than insisting that we are right, we need to step back and look at all possible arguments. If somebody is presenting a version of their view of a process, we need to appreciate from which lens they're looking at that process or that evidence or that business plan or whatever it is, because it is individually unique to each human. Let me move on. In the next few slides, I'll explain further why this theory or this argument is true. 1 second, why is this not moving? Yeah. So there are some keywords I want to talk about. First of all, mindset. So mindset is a way of thinking. It's a way of thinking because we all have different values, different beliefs, different experiences, different memories, different assumptions, all of which come from the day we are born all the way till the day we die. We carry these experiences with us, and each of us have different experiences. And we don't have a different mindset for work and a different mindset for life. It is one mindset. And therefore, we bring that mindset with us as we do our roles as auditors as well. The other word is perception. And perception is actually the way in which something is regarded, understood, and interpreted. So basically, you take in the whole world around you through your perception. You take in that information, you give it meaning, and that meaning is what you keep in your mind. You interpret that and you give it meaning. So perception is also very unique. And then judgment. Judgment is the ability to take that perception, which is basically that understanding, form an opinion, and then reach a decision. And we are passing judgment or giving opinions all the time as auditors. So you can see straight away that the 3 key main elements of what we need in our minds, probably the most powerful thing beyond all your technical capabilities and all your theoretical knowledge, is your ability to exercise your mindset, your perception, and your judgment as auditors. So without further delay, I'm going to spend some time. I know this slide looks a little complicated, but I think I invite you to patiently go through this slide with me because it's important to understand how we actually take in information and how we give information meaning and perception and take action from it. So if you can see, let me just find a pointer. Yeah, if you can see on this side, we have the 5 senses, right? Our eyesight, our hearing, our touch, our nose, and our mouth for taste. The whole world, every single thing that we experience goes through these 5 senses, and that is the only way. Yes, we may have a 6th sense of our gut feel or intuition, which is also very important for auditors. But let's talk about the things that we can, the 5 things we know about very, very obviously. Now, scientists have shown that we receive about 2 million bits of information per second. Right now, sitting in my office at home, there are so many things around me, so many pieces of data, the intensity of the light, the slides in front of me, so many things, probably some noise from the road. Those are the bits of information that we're getting. If you are in an audit conversation, there are so many distractions, there's so many other things the coffee that comes in, the color of the cup in front of you, the expression on the face of the person, the report in front of you, all of that's information. So let's take, for example, one second, why is my slide not moving? Yeah. So if you see, right, we get all this kind of information every single day. There is some new risk information, some escalation, some unexpected event. I mean, the list goes on. It's just an illustration of what's possible. The body language of a person speaks so much. You are in an audit meeting and somebody is quite evasive about when the questions you ask automatically form an opinion about that person. So you take this information and you can't process 2 million bits of information. So based on various research, it is understood that a person processes about 150 bits from that 2 million. Which 150 you take, I take, somebody else takes, is going to be entirely unique. So you could be in the same meeting, listening to the same explanation from the other person. One person may take in more about the body language. Somebody else may take in more about the words that were spoken. Somebody else may even take in some other distraction that is around and not pay attention to the words exactly. So we take in a limited amount of information, and then we further do things to that information. So in the middle, you can see there is this mindset. Various aspects from our mindset, as I explained before. And depending on the person's mindset, each person has a different way of filtering the information that comes in. Some of these filters could be the time and location. If you're a morning person, an evening person, depending on where you are, somebody tells you something so important while you're in the gym, you're probably not paying so much attention to it, right? Maybe the language in which they spoke, maybe it's not so clear to you. The memories you have, somebody is saying something or did something and you automatically match it to a memory. So you took only that part of it. The decisions you've already made, some beliefs that you may be holding, your values, your identity, and the list goes on. So all of these things are already in your mind, and there is this information that's coming your way. And this happens as auditors, and I'm sure you will recognize this when you go for an audit and somebody says something and you've already had a previous conversation of a similar nature, and it turned out that when that person said that in the last context, they were lying. So you assume straight away there's something not quite right because of a memory that you already have in your mind. So what we do as humans is we take this information and we do three things, because we can't store all of this. Our hard drive in our brain doesn't have that much capacity to store everything we see and hear and feel and touch and all of that. So one thing it does, it deletes. So for example, if you come into a meeting and somebody is, carrying a very expensive phone, they're wearing a red shirt, their face is, maybe sweaty, not very well made up, and they're saying something to you. Now, which of that information you take and which you don't is very unique to you. Now, perhaps you heard only the words, but had you looked at the person's face, you would see that that person is quite stressed and something has happened to them. Maybe you didn't take that. So we all delete some information and we only take some of that. The other thing we might do is that when we see this person looking like this, we distort that and store it in a distorted form. What is distortion? We see a person who doesn't come very well made up, not quite unprofessional. They come for an interview and we automatically distort and say that's not a very serious person because that person's come in this not so proper way. And we don't even ask the question to clarify why they are like that, perhaps, because we've already reached a conclusion. So distortion is another way we store information, whereas actually that person may be rushed here from a very serious, maybe they had an accident on the way, maybe they had an emergency, but they still came looking like this because they needed to be there out of respect for the interview rather than disrespect. But we might not know if we take what, our distorted view of the situation. Then the third thing is we generalize. So, for example, if you have a very bad experience with the IT department, time and again, we may generalize and say that the IT department, all of the IT department is not very competent. But that's a generalization. And what happens when you do that is, when you start auditing that department, you will look for evidence to prove that you are right. That you will start, subconsciously, you may end up looking for evidences. The moment you find a mistake, you kind of confirm to yourself, I knew they were not very good and here is more evidence. Whereas actually, there were 15 other evidences that they were very good, which we may have missed. So this is how we process this information, and then we give it an internal representation, right? We give it a meaning in our head and say, okay, this is what I think this information means. So each person has an interpretation and a perception of that meaning, and this interpretation affects how we feel, right? So if somebody comes in not very well groomed for an interview, we feel disrespected, right? So that feeling results in something else. And that feeling is, when you have that feeling, it results in you taking an action or a behavior associated with that feeling, right? If you feel good, you take an action that is in relation to feeling good. If you don't feel so good, you may take a different kind of action. So out comes a response or a behavior. And that behavior may be to not take that person very seriously in an interview. Maybe that's an audit interview, maybe that's a recruitment interview. It doesn't matter, right? This is how we humans process information. And I spent some time on this because it's important to note that even in perceiving risk, right? When you are in a board, say there are 10 people in a board meeting, each of those 10 people around the table will perceive a piece of risk information differently. And you can see that, right? When the way different companies responded to COVID, how many people acted fast, how many people acted slow, right? At the crux of it, you would find that a company that is very well established with risk management processes and protocol probably acted in a different manner than companies that depended on individuals to take decisions and act on them. Because when you left it to individuals to take decisions, this was even more important. Each person was perceiving that risk differently. If you had well-defined risk practices, there would probably be some alignment amongst all those people because they had a common way of looking at risk. Good risk practices doesn't eliminate individual perception of risk, but it tries to narrow the gap between the individual and the organization. So this is just one very important information to know as to why and how the mind works and why individuals carry different perceptions of everything around the world. In fact, they carry different perceptions of reality. So looking at the next thing, right? Why do people respond differently to the same experience? I think what I just explained to you about the way people distort, generalize, and delete information will directly affect how two different people have had the same boss yelling at them, but yet you see one person reacting very unhappily, said, forget it, I can't be bothered to do this. And another person saying, okay, I understand he may be very stressed. Let me go and talk to somebody who can help me to solve this problem. And we see this every day at work, don't we? Because this is how people, it all depends on this first gentleman, whether that his what he took and what memory he captured was quite different from the lady. And this can happen in audits, can't they? Right? Somebody who's had a bad experience with an auditor or somebody who's not supported in delivering bad news, right? It's very important organizational culture to accept bad news with a positive mindset and encourage people to deliver bad news upwards. But if they're not given that kind of support, you can see somebody reacting by keeping quiet. Whereas another person with the same information would go and share it and say, hey, we need some help. There is some risk has emerged at the ground level and we need leadership intervention. So that's another, and you will see this all the time. You will see this at home. If you have children, you will see all three children acting differently to the same information. If you're in the office and you have team members, all of them would be acting differently to the same experience. Another aspect of how the mind works, which I think is very important, is around a very, very, I think, probably a masterpiece of research by a scholar, a professor, Mr. Daniel Kahneman, a book called Thinking Fast and Slow, talks about how the brain operates in making judgment. Okay, I think it's a very detailed, almost like a textbook read, but a great read for people who are operating in spaces where judgment is an important part. And I think auditors fit very, very well in the space where we rely heavily on making judgment. And by the way, he won the Nobel Prize as well for the amount of research he has done in this kind of space. I'll quickly just give you an overview. I think it's important to know this because 95% of our decision making happens with what we call system one, fast thinking. Fast thinking means you see something and straight away you formed an opinion. You don't even process that deeply enough with a rational mind. The fast thinking mind is your intuitive mind. You see somebody with an angry face, you have an opinion. You see somebody walking down the street, you judge attractiveness, whether you want to judge it or not. You say, that person looks good. It's a fast thinking system. You see something happen in the office space, you automatically form an opinion, and then what happens when you form this opinion? You end up looking for evidence to prove this opinion. So what is this system one, fast thinking? It's fast, it's autopilot, it almost has no effort linked to it. It's implicit, it's within you. It doesn't require any kind of effort. It's effortless. It's associative. What does that mean? It means that it looks for memories. It looks for already stored information from your mental hard drive to use to make that decision. So you see something and then you quickly look at your hard drive and say, okay, what does this mean? And you quickly make an opinion or a decision based on that. It's difficult to control or modify, not impossible, but difficult. And it happens almost subconsciously with very little self-awareness. And if I showed you, for example, this picture, right? This is the face of somebody who appears to be angry, appears to be saying something or shouting. The moment you see this, if you were face this person in real life, you would probably straight away know they're angry, they're shouting, you're probably foreseeing even the next 5 minutes of this conversation being something, that's not going to be very pleasant. And your body automatically, chemically, emotionally responds to this kind of image. If you see this, by maybe feeling worried, maybe feeling angry back, maybe, and it might cause you to avoid this person. It might cause you to automatically come up with a response or a defense. All of that happens automatically just by looking at somebody who appears to be angry, right? And this is an uncontrolled fast system. And the thing is, 95% of the thinking we do happens here. And that is why when we go into the workplace and as auditors, we must appreciate, this is not, when somebody reacts immediately to something you may suggest or say or do or ask, perhaps they haven't yet had the ability to use their thinking mind and their actual rational thinking mind. They're just reacting from their subconscious automatic mind. And it's perhaps also our responsibility to patiently take them, slow down that thinking process and help them re-explain what is the purpose of this conversation and re-explain why we are here, in case you get a response that perhaps is not in sync with what you're expecting. Now, there's another system, which is the slow system, which is why the book is called Thinking Fast and Slow. The slow system is the system that we use 5% of the time. It's slow, it's sequential or quite serial. It's very explicit. It requires effort. It's logical, it's skeptical, it's deliberately controlled, and it's highly self-aware. This is your active thinking brain. And ironically, we only use that part of the brain 5% of the time, right? So if I were to give you, if I were to show you this, unless you are a mathematical genius, perhaps it'll take you some effort to work out the answer to this image, right? Because you need to use your slow thinking system 2 brain to multiply 17 by 24. You're not going to use your fast thinking autopilot brain to give this answer unless you have, obviously, there are some people who have very fast techniques in multiplication. And this is why, when we see some information, if we as auditors know that first response is the fast thinking system 1 response, it is okay for us to be patient and encourage the activation of system 2 in our clients, in our stakeholders, in ourselves as well. When we are reacting to some kind of response we get, remember that your first reaction is always your system 1 reaction. It is not your system 2 reaction. You then need to stop, slow down, rethink, re-examine your thoughts, and see whether you've really come up with the logical, most appropriate response to a situation. And I wanted you to highlight this because this affects our day-to-day activities in life, but obviously, an extension of that in our roles as auditors, as risk professionals, and so on and so forth. The work of Daniel Kahneman was also influenced by some of the work of another psychologist called Paul Slovic, who did almost all his research in the role of psychology in risk management. He was one of those I would say gurus in the space of business psychology, and in particular in risk management. And his extensive research, he found that risk does not, this is a statement that you get from his book. Risk does not exist out there, independent of our minds and culture, waiting to be measured, right? It does not exist. Human beings have invented the concept of risk to help them understand and cope with the dangers and uncertainties of life. Although these dangers are real, there is no such thing as real risk or objective risk, because risk is highly associated with emotion and perception, and therefore what is real is almost impossible to define, right? And I want to use this phrase to go on to my next slide, which is really talking about the shortcuts that happen when we make risk-based thinking or decisions, right? So heuristics basically is a word that effectively means the shortcuts. What are the shortcuts we take which impacts risk perception and cognitive bias? Paul Slovic's other quote, he says, actual and perceived risk are often very different. We use all kinds of shortcuts to guess the real risk. Some of these, I'm not going to go into all of these, but some of these, for example, is the risk, the heuristic or the shortcut of control. If we believe, based on our experiences or various things, that we have control over the situation, our perception of that risk will be very different. We may perceive it to be low risk because we feel our shortcut tells us that we have control over the situation. If, on the other hand, let's say availability, what does availability means? How quickly can you recall some information? And this is highly, highly influenced by media coverage, right? What is covered in the newspapers highly influence how we perceive risk. There are some, if you could neutrally look at all the information available in the world, the newspapers would be significantly biased in what they cover. But because that information is out there, it's on YouTube, it's on the newspapers, and there's a cascade effect. The moment the newspaper covers something, people talk about it, and a small thing becomes very big. So the availability heuristic or bias causes us to perceive certain risks as bigger or smaller just because of the amount of information or coverage there is about it. And it's interesting, one of the researchers that they did, for example, they found, and I'm going to just referring to one of my books quickly, people have perceived that death by accident is higher than death by diabetes or by stroke, right? Because we never cover, how many times do you see newspapers saying, A died from stroke or B died from diabetes, right? But the newspaper covers so much about this accident or that accident because there is emotional intensity to coverage about accidents, which makes it newsworthy, and not about stroke or diabetes. But in actual fact, the death of diabetes is probably there's 4 deaths from diabetes to 1 accident death. And the stroke is something similar. So just because information is available and sensationalized and all of that, our perception about that kind of risk is distorted by the kind of shortcuts we are almost forced to make because of what coverage there are. And I don't have the time right now to go into all of these shortcuts, and I'm happy to, if anyone wants to reach out to me over LinkedIn, happy to share some details on this. But there's so many shortcuts or biases that exist in how we interpret risk. And it's important as auditors to know this because you are facing this day in, day out. Each person you meet in an audit conversation is carrying their shortcuts with them. And you don't know these shortcuts, but you need to listen out for these shortcuts and then maybe ask some very intelligent questions to explore further the meaning behind the judgment or meaning behind the interpretation they're giving you. Moving on. So I want to talk about at least some good news, I guess. So when we talked about the fast system 1 and system 2, the fast thinking and the slow thinking brain, our brain is a very, very magnificent organ. It has got multiple parts, but I want to specifically call out 2 parts. And the primitive brain, which is the amygdala, and the prefrontal cortex, which is your executive brain. Your primitive brain is the brain which helps you survive. It's the brain that helps you jump out of a car that's coming towards you. It's the brain that helps you lift your hand off a hot pot when you touch it by mistake. It's the brain that helps you survive. This brain is extremely fast, right? That's why it's called, and your system 1 brain that we talked about here is predominantly sitting in the amygdala, right? The reason I want to call this out and specifically talk about it is because the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex operate quite differently when you receive information. The prefrontal cortex is your system 2 brain. It's the brain that is highly mature, highly executive-like. It's got thinking capacity. It can rationalize, make decisions, but it is not as fast. It's the slow brain. It requires effort. It requires you to slow down, patiently look at all the data in front of you, and then make a judgment. Now, you know how it is in real life. We make judgments very fast, and that is predominantly fueled by the amygdala. What's important to know, and I just want to talk a little bit about the science behind these. When we receive, we all know, right? Our brains, we have the nervous system, and we have neurons in our brain, and all these neurons pass information through the nervous system. You would have also studied this in biology. The neurons pass information to the amygdala faster than they go to the prefrontal cortex. And that is why the moment you get information, your fast thinking brain is activated faster because the data or the flow is faster to the amygdala than it is to the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is a slow brain, requires you to pause, think, and then perhaps as you see this information, assuming this is neuron to neuron, as the information flows, you want to stop it here and send it to a different thinking system, right? That requires conscious effort, like pause. The moment you get upset by something, pause and see what does it mean? And can I change my thinking? The point is, it's possible to do that. And I wanted to highlight this because we need to know that there are 2 different kinds of brains in operation. Now, let's talk about what scientists have also discovered about how our brains operate. There is a term that is used, which is called neuroplasticity, which basically talks about how flexible and adaptive our brains are. So how I spoke about, the memories and the values and the beliefs that come into our brain from the day we are born and all the experiences that we have in our lives. The good news is all of those things, all those filters that are there in our mind can be changed, right? So neuroplasticity is the study that goes into and is in fact the process through which our nervous system can change its activity in response to internal and external stimuli by reorganizing its structure, functions, and connections. So the connection that was happening here, which is automatic, you can reorganize it and change the connection through some conscious effort of creating new filters or new pathways in your mind. There's a very lovely quote, which I found very appropriate, which talks about the creation of new thoughts, right, in a person's mind. So I'll just read this. As a single footstep will not make a path on earth, so a single thought will not make a pathway in the mind. And if you see this image here, right, somebody is trying to go through this jungle. And if you imagine going to a thick jungle for the first time, you will not find a path that's clear. This is similar to how if you want to create a new thought in the mind of a person, at the first time, it's like it can't digest. It's not quite registering, right? So, but they're listening to you. They're appreciating it, but it's not a default path. It's not the easy path to remember that piece of information. And you'll see this in children, right? When I'm sure those of you who are parents will that you keep telling your child the same thing and they forget about it because it's not it's like asking them to remember something in this big jungly forest. But if you help them, right now, let's come back to business. If you help a colleague or a stakeholder, an audit process owner, to think differently about a control repeatedly by working with them, over time, this jungle becomes a grassy kind of path. It looks like something in image number 2, which has a path. It's still covered by some grass, but it's easier to walk. And over time, the more and more they do this new way of thinking, this new way of working, which is aligned to, say, the organizational values and culture, you will find that they are more, it's much more easy. It becomes the way of life. So to make a deep physical path, we walk again and again. To make a deep mental path, we must think over and over the kind of thought we wish to dominate our lives. Now, of course, this is not written about business. It's written about life, but the same concept applies in business. Now, the good news about this is that even in business, we can create new ways of people to think. So imagine thousands of people coming into your organization, all of them coming with their own personal filters, their personal beliefs, values, mindsets, etc. And we are expecting them to operate within the organizational culture, the organizational risk appetite, the value system, the vision, etc. It's really difficult unless we put conscious effort to create new ways of thinking for these people in an organization. And I think auditors have a really important role to play here. So the next few slides, I'm going to talk about the kind of interventions. I call it interventions because as auditors, you need to do something conscious, or even as risk managers, something conscious to make sure that these new pathways exist within the organization. So let's talk about the first one. Very obviously, if you're talking about risk management, the various disciplines of risk exist not by chance, but by design and for a reason. And if you really examine them properly, it's really to start aligning mindsets within the organization. So as an auditor, we must assess and fully understand an organization's risk framework, risk culture, risk maturity before deciding our risk-based internal audit strategy. So what are some of these things? Risk awareness. When you go into an organization and you're going to audit, how risk aware is the organization? Do you talk to your people, your process owners about their understanding of risk? Do we jump straight into internal controls? Do you have, make a checker? Do you have reconciliations, etc.? Why are we doing that? Take a step back and talk about risk awareness. If people are aware about the risk, the controls will automatically fall into place. So one important thing for auditors to do is assess how risk aware are people. Next is risk competency. How well equipped and trained are the people to manage risk in an organization? Remember, they're coming from all over the world and all over the different backgrounds, and you're expecting them to operate in one organization in a manner that is consistent and aligned to the organizational's values. You need to help those people to develop awareness, competency, understand the appetite. Do we have an appetite, a risk appetite in the organization? Do people understand it? Does the internal auditor understand it? What is the risk culture and what is the risk maturity? So to get better alignment of risk perception in an organization, a risk manager must help people create new neurological filters through training, coaching, and consistently applying the risk framework. As auditors, we must assess if that's happening. Okay. And I want to just talk a few more things. So one example I talked about is risk appetite. You need to be asking, there's a reason why we need to have a risk appetite is to help people think and operate in the same way. If risk appetite is flexible and fluid, then how is anyone supposed to apply it? Right? If everybody decides today this is high risk, tomorrow that is high risk, and it's not consistent, it's fine if there are only two people making risk decisions for the entire organization. But if you're a 3-4 lakh employee base and everybody needs to think and operate the same way, we need to have an explicit risk appetite and communicate it and ensure it's understood, so that for the reasons I already spoke, people are bringing their personal understanding of risk when they join an organization. Some very good research was done by the Institute of Risk Management in the UK, on risk culture and why it's important. It's still evolving. It's new. When I say evolving, the study is 10 years old, maybe 10, 11 years old, but I would still say a lot more work needs to happen in this space. As you can see, right, in the heart of risk culture is already an acknowledgement about personal predisposition to risk. Everything I spoke to you so far today about people's individual interpretation and perception of risk is really what this is all about. So the first, and because of this, you can see how big the risk culture needs to be so that you can help people overcome their personal predisposition to risk and become aligned to the organization's needs. Second is personal ethics. We talk a lot about ethics, but some research has been done about how people bring their ethical standards, I would say, or moral DNA differently to life than to work. And therefore, as an organization, we need to help people align to the ethics of the organization through proper, repeated communication about what ethical standards the organization is operating. And as auditors, you should be auditing how are we creating an ethically aligned organization. Of course, then there's behaviors, which is an outcome of personal predisposition to risk and ethics comes behaviors. Then you have the org culture and the risk culture. So I want to talk a little bit about the research that was done on ethics. So there's a assessment that they have created called the Moral DNA Ethics in Life at Work assessment. It's like a tool. And some interesting outcomes came from that. What they found was that in life, people take more decisions. If you see this middle one, people take more decisions in life using the space of care, empathy, love. I do something because I care. I do something because I empathize. That's what we do in life. When you relate with another human being, a relative, a family member, a colleague, you act from the space of care. But when it comes to work, people use their empathy and their care less, and they use obedience to rules. So if you have a policy or some regulation or some rules within the organization, people prefer to follow the rule and say, look, I did what the policy said, rather than use their judgment and care and do what's right, even though it may not be in sync with the rule or the policy. So people in some ways perhaps protect themselves by following the policy, even though they may not agree. And the other one is reason. People prefer to take decisions if they can justify it, even though empathy may dictate that they do something else. So, there is, each person brings a slightly different version of themselves to work. They're more aligned to make decisions based on justifiability and make decisions based on rule adherence than to make decisions based on care. And I think the only time we saw this real shift happen in the last 3 years was during the pandemic, when I think people chucked the policies and chucked logic and did things truly out of care. Because the people affected in the pandemic were other people, rather than business objectives or business goals. The people affected in the pandemic, and I think we will see more and more of decision making from the space of care when other humans are affected, as opposed to whether business objectives or profits or other things are affected. So that's another important piece of information for, when we think people don't seem to care or don't seem to do things that are right, it's because there perhaps are policies and rationales that allow them to do something different, right? Like, why can't you do this extra bit? It's like, I don't need to. No one's expecting me to do it, right? That's what you get in the office space. One more element, I won't spend too much time on this, but the Institute of Risk Management has come up with a very nice model on risk culture. Each and reasons why I'm happy to share the link at the end to this report, which is available publicly. on what are the elements to audit and to check and to implement to have a solid risk culture in an organization so that you can align people's mindsets to the organizational culture and value. I talked about earlier, in order to slow down and use system 2 and not allow system 1 to take over. Another researcher, Howard Ross, wrote a book in 2014 called Everyday Bias. I think we all know that bias affects our judgments as auditors. So it is important for us to practice this very nice, simple five-stage process. It's called pause. And by pausing, you can activate your slow thinking brain. Step 1, pay attention to what's happening beneath the judgment. So if a judgment has happened just by system 1 or the fast thinking brain, pause for a moment and just pay attention again. What was the basis of this judgment? Was it the event triggered a fast thinking response, or did I really use the data and all the information available to interpret and then form a judgment? Acknowledge and identify your own reactions, interpretation, and judgments. First, there should be a self-reflection that says, yes, my fast thinking brain took over. There was a bias in play. That's what happened. No problem. Acknowledge it. Then understand that the other person and that other person had similar possible reactions, and you could also have chosen a different reaction. So you is about what else is possible. And then S is to search for the most constructive, empowering, or productive way to deal with the situation. You've got a situation, your fast thinking brain gave you one interpretation. Can you use the data and information available to search for a different, more constructive, empowering meaning a win-win situation, right? No one wants to audit with the process owner feeling bad. We are all in the audit is all about enhancing value for the organization. And therefore, you want a win-win outcome. You need to look for a different constructive way of handling the outcome. And then finally, E, execute your action plan, acting consistently with what makes most sense. So that's another intervention I would want to offer you. The third one, which is another very interesting one, you know how I talked about information coming in, we interpret it, the interpretation, we give meaning, the meaning makes us have a feeling, and the feeling causes us to have an action. Now, if the interpretation leaves us with a feeling of anger, fear, frustration, our actions may not be the most appropriate. You've heard loud voiced audit conversations before, people not an outright rejection of an observation, and so on and so forth. That's because the presentation or the input taken by the auditee left them feeling nervous, upset, disrespected, misunderstood, whatever, right? It's not always easy. While this talks about rethinking the situation, it's not always easy to rethink the situation in that very moment. This is a slow process, as we said. But another technique that you can use when you are in a situation which is not very productive because everyone's upset is to change your physiology. Now, what this research has shown that your thoughts, your feelings, and your physiology, which is your body, are in a loop, right? Your thoughts affect how you feel, and how you feel affects your body. And the beauty is, if you change any one of these, you can change the whole cycle. So, for example, when your body is feeling tensed and angry and upset, if you can choose to slow down your breathing, go for a walk, take a cup of tea, just get out of that horrible meeting for a 2-minute toilet break even, your entire body resets. Not completely, but slightly resets. So when you come back into that meeting, having taken a 2-minute break, having gone for stretch yourself, taken a deep breath, release your tension and come back, the entire conversation will change. If you don't believe me, you can certainly try it, but it's extremely powerful. So if you are in a difficult situation and you're going, there's a downward spiraling negative conversation, try and break that cycle by changing your body, the way you breathe, the way you stand, the way you sit, the way the tension in your body. Automatically, your thinking will start to change. So that's another intervention I leave you. And this is the last one. We know that we must take risk, and any organization has to take risk to survive. But worse than taking risk is actually not taking any action, right? If taking risk is your biggest risk. If you're not taking risk is your biggest risk, not taking action is your second biggest risk. And there is a reason why people don't take action. And as auditors, you've seen repeat observations coming. The action isn't being taken. People are not fixing the actual issue, right? So there's a great intention and there's a great outcome, but in between there is a lack of action. And as auditors, I think we have an important role to play to help an organization deal with that space as well. Why don't people take action? There's negative perception. What's the point? Nothing's going to change. I'm not able. I have the lack of ability. I have the lack of motivation. All of these could result in me not taking action. Now, this is, and I'm going to link this back to your risk-based internal audit strategy. If an organization has got high risk area for which they are, and I quickly explain this model, right? So on the bottom you've got your gross risk, the gross risk on the bottom, and on the vertical you have the control maturity. If the control maturity is low, but the gross risk is very high, it means people are not taking action, and this is this bottom space here. People are not taking action because of the various reasons. Either there's no budget, there's no motivation, there's something that's not there. It is in this space, high risk, low control maturity, where auditors need to have a different strategy. We need to step in to support, to coach, to consult, maybe even to help direct and manage for a while, to help them get over this stuckness, right? We have to help them get over this stuckness. So if in your audit execution, just use this, think about where are certain processes? Why do we keep having problems there? Why are we not getting to the heart of it and closing it? Maybe auditing is not the answer. See, assurance is only valuable when you are having a higher degree of control maturity. The controls are there, people know what they're doing, then you come and audit. But if controls are not there and you're just giving report after report of observations, nothing's changing. It means something else needs to happen. That's why we say internal audit is both a combination of assurance and consulting activity, right? I think this is my last slide. I hope there was some value for you to take away from understanding the psychology behind risk management. When I first came across this, it made me I guess energized, curious, and somewhat uncomfortable because there was so much information out there which I hadn't realized. And I spent the last 10 years in this space thinking about all of these concepts. But I welcome you to look at the fact that what makes you uncomfortable is your biggest opportunity for growth. And on that note, if you are keen on any further information on this, please reach out to me on LinkedIn. This is my LinkedIn handle. And with that, thank you. I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a nice and beautifully presented your topic. And I think question will be taken by Ayaz at last. I think right now we don't have any question. And you said very rightly, no risk, no gain. And if the more risk when you don't take action.
Yes,
that is very good saying and fantastic saying. And thanks to you for such a wonderful deliberation. And now I invite the third speaker of today's program, CA Gaurav Misra ji. And first of all, sir, welcome, Gaurav ji. Gaurav sir, are you there? Ji Gaurav sir, welcome sir. Welcome sir. First of all, the Gaurav sir will take topic digitization in internal audit, and here the brief profile of Gaurav sir. Gaurav sir is a manager with PwC.
Yes. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir. I'm taking your profile, sir. Gaurav is a manager with the PwC Risk Assurance Service practice in India. He has over 6+ years of professional experience in the risk-based internal audit, process improvement reviews, and risk management services. He has been actively involved in process and control diligence, ERM reviews, risk-based process reviews, setting of MIS framework, and operational Are you saying something, sir? Operational risk reviews for multiple sector, including metal and mining, manufacturing, industrial manufacturing, and infrastructure sector. He has also acted as a subject matter expert to carry out process redesign and transformation exercise for large-scale companies. Some of the key engagement handles are metal and mining, industrial manufacturing and textile, carried out process review of a large alloy steel manufacturing companies covering over 4 manufacturing locations across India. The assignment involved review of control design, identify potential area of cost saving and improving operational efficiencies. Carried out internal audit for a leading electrical equipment manufacturing company covering over 22 manufacturing locations at pan India level. Designed standard operating procedure, management reporting framework, and dashboard for a leading metal and mining client. Lead the internal financial control review and internal audit engagement for large scale public sector client and MNC client in oil and gas, metal and mining sector. As part of these engagement, he has contributed to maturity enhancement of processes such as procurement of material and services, coal procurement, contract labor management, plant maintenance, account payable, inventory management, secondary and NCO sales, order to cash, marketing, health, safety, and environment, capex and project, metal balancing, yield balancing, alloy balancing, HR and payroll, quality testing process. Lead the concurrent audit, internal audit, and process review engagement of alloy manufacturing company for large alloy steel manufacturing company. Assisted in setting up MD office for one of the alloy steel manufacturing company. And I think such a nice and wonderful profile I read here, and I welcome Gaurav Misra sir, and it's over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dixit ji. And first of all, thanks to Nanda ji for giving me such an overwhelming opportunity to speak and sharing the session with a very eminent speaker, Bhavani and Swati. So I think I was also listening the entire session of the previous two session, and I can say that yes, that the session was literally quite good. So without wasting any much of the time, so I'll come directly on the part of the digitization. So is my screen is visible? Sir, my screen
Yes,
is
sir. Yes,
visible?
sir. It's
Okay,
visible.
thank you so much. So the today's topic, what IASB has given to me, that digitizing the audit. Yes, post the COVID scenario. So if you see that entire the work culture, and prior to COVID scenario, the work culture is totally different. We used to believe into going to the offices, doing the all the documentation part, checking of all the or verifying all the physical documents and all those things. But post the COVID scenario, if you see the apart from the audit function, also the function like operational function, finance function, and other support function like HR and payroll, like procurement and all those things, these has been automated. And people working from home, they have done a lot of tremendous job into the audit as well as finance sector. If we talk about little bit, just giving the gist or scenario about this digitizing the audit, why there is a need, and why there is a paradigm shift into this culture of the audit. Like if you see that there is a traditional way of the approach, that we used to have a kickoff meeting, we used to visit the plant, then we verifying the understanding the entire processes and verifying all the documents in physical. But now if you see, people are very resistant to travel to the client location, but yes, they do or they perform the most of the job or most of the audit function offline. You can say that as a part of the remote audit, and they visit to the plant or client office just uh, only for the closure of the audits. So if we see that these are the trend and challenges which is impacting the internal audit services. So like we see that the external context, and there's a two contexts. One is external and another is the internal context. So like evolving the business models, change in the business process due to digital disruption. So like in case of procurement, if I'm taking about one very recent example. So most of the companies now they are working towards the centralization of the entire process. Bill booking process is now no more dependent on the persons. Entire bill booking at a big organization, so like ArcelorMittal or you can say Vedanta or any of the client you see, that entire bill booking is being done. You can say that through the bot model, and the entire bot is doing booking the bill. Person need to just see the exceptions. What are the exception report? And if that job is replaced by that particular person, it means that audit, the way of the audit has been changed. Increased regulatory pressures, increased responsibilities of the governance and oversight committees, remote working environment. So like I said just a few minutes back that post-COVID people are very resistant in visiting to the client places, in traveling too much. So these are the external requirements that the trend of the remote audit has been started. But if we see about the internal context, it's about the execution challenge like the budgets. So nowadays you cannot hire so many number of peoples in your team. So you have to work within a limited resources and by getting the maximum output. And how it is possible? By implementing the various tools, various portals, and doing the audit, or you can say that the data analytics, what we were using through the Excel sheet or Google Sheets. Now this has been replaced through the various tools, which is just giving you the exception report. Even in the SAP function, there are a lot of reports is available, or you can say that can be customized with the exception report. And now, if that system is already giving you the exception report, then the entire 50% of the work has been replaced, or you can say that 50% of the workforce, or you can say that 50% of time can be saved by the system itself. Now, the 50% job to verify that particular exceptions, whatever the exceptions has been arised or has been given by the system or populated by the system, you have to, on a sample basis, you have to verify whether that exception is correct or not. But if we talk about the exception challenge, that there's a new dimension of the risk around IT, resistance, capacity planning, supply chain, cyber security, and privacy. So in this current scenario, one at a one pace that audit is being digitized, but there's a challenge of the cyber security and privacy of the data, because you cannot share the data to everyone, because nowadays data is like a oil. And going forward, data is the biggest thing, because at one data point, suppose I'm just taking one example, if company has a customer database of around 5,000 customer base, and if someone leaked that particular data into the public domain, or can share the data with some other company, I think this is the biggest challenge. And there are some and for these things the audit like a cyber security audit, so these things has been emerged. But if we talk about the people's challenges, the frequent change in the audit staff, as we know that nowadays retention of the manpower is very important. And now if people, so like in the previous scenarios around 5 or 8 years back, if you see that your audit or any of the staff at any of the department, they used to stay for 4 or 5 or 6 years or more number of years. But if you see but if you see in the case of nowadays, people used to stay at the organization for more than, I can say, 1 or 2 years. So these are some challenges. These are some challenges which peoples are following. And now the second thing is people dependent process. Even organization don't want to define their process as a people dependent. They want to make it a more system driven process, because if the process is more of the people dependent, it means that there's a high chances of risk that when that person has been resigned or sacked from that particular organization, the entire process is people dependent. That can be a big problem. Nowadays, that existing staff lacking data ethics and digital skill, yes, it is very important to learn a new skill, so this is the biggest thing in the internal context. But if we talk about that, what is the expectation of the management, and whether the expectation of management is increasing day by day from the IA and IFC both part. So if we talk about the IA, it is one of the part, and IA is like one of the ocean, and IFC is one part of the IA. So like every organization needs that their transactions can be pre-audited, through the system. There should be a maker checker mechanism that entire 100% of the transaction should be verified. And how this is possible? This is possible through implementation of various tools, various data analytics, like by using the idea, by getting a dashboard, of getting a exception report. So like nowadays, Power BI is very useful, or you can say that the Power BI is, a lot of the companies are using the Power BI to getting the dashboard or preparing the dashboard. So that is giving the various information. And don't do not depend on the process owner. This is the expectation of the management. They don't want to depend on the process owner that yes, when they will give the data, the audit team will start the data. No, it is not like that now. It is like this: you just inform the process owner and the entire system is there. You have to take out the data from the system and you just complete the audit. Reporting to visualization and dashboard, yes. Preparing a report in a detailed format and like a various paragraphs, and rather than and presenting a report into dashboard format in graphs like revenue trends. If you want to show some anomalies in the revenue, that there's a you can say that incorrect recognition of the revenue. And if you show the trend that these are the revenue analysis trend, these are the your expenses trend, you need to focus on this area, you need to focus on this area. So like you can say, so this is the thing which that management always expect from the internal auditor. The next part is provide the greater coverage without increasing the audit resources, which I have already covered as a part of the internal context. Provide strategic insights over transactional exception reporting. So like nowadays system is you can say nowadays system is you can say that already giving the exception report. In that exception report, you need to just deep dive that what is the root cause for these exceptions. So I think that 50% of the task has been performed by the system and 50% of the task is now performed by the audit staff. So this is the expectation that digitization is required for the purpose of the IA and IFC. So now if I have here, so here I have tried to map that what was the traditional approach and how it transformed and how it is fit for the future. So like in the case of the traditional audit approach, it was a reactive approach, and nowadays it is a proactive approach. Earlier the transaction would happen and you find out these were the gaps based on the past data analysis. Now organization expect that you give us, auditor give us, auditor should give us that red flags, that these are the possible risk areas or possible risky transactions where you need to focus or management need to focus more on. Point in time assessment. Now the point in time assessment, if I talk about point in time assessment, it means that past transaction based data analysis, continuous risk sensing. It means that on a day-to-day basis audit, if you are getting the exception report that these are the open. So let's take one example. So if you have prepared a dashboard which reflects the entire your invoice booking process, your GRN processes, and the bill is booked by. So I'll take both example. Earlier the bill was booked by person. Now the bill is booking by the bot. In the person, in the first scenario, if you see, you need to. So if you was people department was totally dependent on the particular person. It means that yes, person might book the bill 10 bills in a time, 20 bills in a time, 30 invoices in a time. But now if you talk about the bot, you just scan the invoice, they will follow all the maker checker mechanism, and based on the algorithm basis, based on that particular barcode scanner, you just system will bot will book the data, and bot will give you the exact real time data that from how many number of invoices, how many number of invoices have been worked, and for in how many cases there is exception. But in the earlier case, this was not the case. You need to take out the data down from the system, from the SAP or ERP, and you need to just see physically that how many invoices we have received and how many invoices we have booked. Limited business, yes, in the case of traditional internal audit, there was a sample based audit, but now it's 100% population coverage. Because in the sample based audit, this was a case that based on the X number of transactions they were used to do the audit. But in case of the now digitization mode, you need to just perform the data and text, or system perform the data and text for the entire part. Limited business insights and yes, strategic risk insights and analysis. Now a case earlier there was a manual testing of the control, and now RPA is a robotic process automation and workflows in the control testing. And how, if we talk about the workflows system, so like in case of I have just given you the example bill booking. So bill booking is being done by the so entire bill. So nowadays I'll just give it one real example. So like in one of the company, there's a process implemented for the bill booking through bot. So how this process was, the entire one person was dedicated to scan the entire invoices. That particular person was just scanning the invoices in the predefined format and just save the data into the that particular format. And the workflows was defined in the data management system. And once that invoice has been scanned and put into that particular DMS system, it was just going to the direct tax team. They ensures that yes, whether the taxation rate and tax TDS has been deducted or not, and then it was going to the indirect tax team. Post verification of the entire invoices, once entire clearances has been given, it automatically push up to the SAP for booking of the invoices. So these are the scenarios. So in this case, so this is the like case of workflows in the control testing. So in this case, how the auditor will perform? Auditor will just perform the testing. That what is the turnaround time in between these processes? Is there any exceptional reporting? Is there any exceptional turnaround time which is being followed? And how many number of invoices has not been booked? So auditor need to focus more from the SOD's perspective, more from the workflows perspective, rather than manual testing of the each and every invoices. Lack of ownership on risk and mitigation. Earlier it was very less concentrated, but nowadays it's a defined risk owners at all level and escalation process. So like if there's something mishappened at the level of taxation, so taxation is wholly and solely responsible nowadays. Earlier, the bill booking process was very limited to the finance team. That yes, finance team should ensure that yes, entire things is correct, whether the rate as per the purchase order is correct or not, whether the terms and conditions is correct or not. So this is a difference between the earlier traditional based audit approach and nowadays post the transformation. Earlier the approach was people plus approach. Now it is people plus approach plus involvement of the technology. Now, so this I have tried to prepare that how the IA is transforming between the people approach and technology, the PAT model. So if you see that this one is about the technology part, this one is about the approach, this one is about the people. So if you so this is like a means top to bottom approach. So if you see at the bottom level, your entire talent is there. At the both the triangle sides, one is the side the technology and another is the approach. सो आपका अप्रोच जो होगा टेक्नोलॉजी में और ट्रेडिशनल ऑडिट में बोथ विल बी टोटली डिफरेंट because in the traditional audit you need to focus more on the physical part, more on the manual control testing, more on the person dependent. But in case of technology you need to focus on the system gaps, whether your system control is well in place or not, whether the design control is well in place or not. In the technology audit, if the design is well in place, then there's a very less chances or very minimal chances for the failure of the operating effectiveness of the control. But if we talk about this one about the traditional audit approach, design might be correct because you check the sample data on a single data, based on the single data you check the design. But operating effectiveness, as it is a manual process, so entire operating effectiveness might differ. The design at the level of design it is quite good, but at the level of operating effectiveness it might not be good. So like if you see that technology, use of audit management tools for end-to-end tracking of audit activities, including data gathering, project management, status update, and implementation. So nowadays, various tools are available into the market for the data sharing. So there is no need to share the data over mail. And in that tool, you have to just assign that these are your initial data requests. And from that initial data request, you will just assign that, but what is the timeline when you are expecting that particular data. You will put the expected date of receipt of data and you will assign that particular responsibility to the person whom the management has assigned. The entire dashboard will give you that when the auditor has flowed the data, when the data has been submitted by the client, and when the against the additional data has been asked by the client. It will show you the real time picture. Means there is no if and but, there is no excuse. There will be no excuse that why there's a delay and all. It will show that yes, if there's a delay from the audit side, it will show that delay. If there's delay from the process, it will show the delay. So this is about the entire technology. Use of the robotic process automation, bot and data analytics tool for the control testing. So a lot of tools are available into the market. So like I'm just giving you one example. So like account reconciliation, there are a lot of tools are available into the market to perform the account reconciliation. You need to just deploy the that particular portal. You have to maintain. You have to just rectify your entire vendor master database. If your entire vendor master database is correct, then the data will automatically flow to that particular portal. Now, how the auditor will play a role? This tool will give you the exact data that yes, for these cases, the account reconciliation is pending. But how the auditor will play an important role in this data? By using this account reconciliation tool, auditor will identify that yes, for these cases, the data has been not received. And for X many cases, data has been received, but that account reconciliation has not been performed. Or if the account reconciliation has not been performed or performed, but the data has not been reverted back to the or response has not been given to the client. So the entire exception is given into that portal by using that portal by the auditor. Use of the continuous control monitoring for the risk KPIs and early warning indicators. So another thing is at every processes, like in the procurement to pay process, in order to cash, in inventory, in transactions, in invoice booking process, or you can say in the inventory management, there are some KPIs. Management just need to focus on the KPIs that these are the top 10 KPIs we need to monitor on the regular basis. And based on the that 10 KPIs, that they will implement the tool and section system will give you the exceptions. System will give you the exception. Now it is up to the auditor. Now it is handed over to the auditor. Auditor will see the entire exception reports and they will comment whether that exception is high, medium, or risk or low. So this is the entire thing. Use of the dashboarding tools for the dynamic dashboard reporting. So I think so like I know the Power BI, which is very good tool in the you can say that dashboarding. You can change. You can change the Power BI dashboard on a real time basis. But to perform all these activities, we need some, you can say, that the person who is well equipped with the knowledge, well equipped with that particular IT environment and all those things. But if we talk about the approach, so if the approach will be shift from reactive to proactive, it will be the control centric rather than the risk centric. Shift approach from process control reviews to integrated risk approach, strengthening first and second line defense through the digital collaboration and continuous monitoring. Redefine the audit universe in alignment with the ERM, which is working at the level of the organization as a whole. Real-time communication and dynamic dashboard reporting, which I have already discussed. So now this, I have tried to map that how the remote audits effective, enabling very effectively. This is the existing use of it. So now the thing is, so earlier we used to visit the plant, we used to visit the plant, then we do the kickoff meetings, then we send the initial data request, then we update the audit program, and then we start the execution. These were the entire traditional way of approach. So the top bottom approach, this is the top. The top line is saying about this without using any tools. That's the traditional way of approach. But now if we talk about this is the technology based. So like there is no need to visit to the plant. So you can do the meetings virtually online. You can say you can create a platform or you can create a OneDrive or cloud server based data where the entire data can be shown. You can share the audit queries, audit observation into that portal itself also. Data extraction through remote access to ERP or any of the portal what the company is using. And in terms of the data, document sharing, sometimes nowadays that for the data sharing, they scan the data and they just share you on the folders. Heavy use of the data analytics because nowadays we focus more on the data analytics part. And into that data analytics, if any exception is there, we just go on the deeper and deeper. Virtual discussion is there, publishing of the dashboard and presentation to the management through online. There is no, even nowadays that most of the firms are conducting the audit committee meeting virtually also. Tracking through SharePoint, share Google Drive, OneDrive. These are the various modes available. Another thing is use of the data analytics across the audit life cycle. So use of the data analytics across the audit lifecycle. So if we see that data analytics plays a very pivotal role in across the audit lifecycle, planning, sampling, and execution. It used to analyze the large data points, identification of the process lapses, data inconsistencies, trends, and pattern at the later stage. So this is the thing which I have already covered, that analytics before the audit, and we just drive out the from the data analytics. We find out the sampling, and from the sampling we just go comment on the design part. And if the design there is an inconsistency to the design part, we cover that, yes, operating effectiveness on all those things, and then reporting to the dashboard. There is various tools. So like idea is very good tool for the data analytics. A lot of telecom industries, because over there there's a lot of huge data is there. Alteryx is one of the things which is used in the audit by the auditor. So let's take up and let's have an outlook of automation for the audit. If we talk about the moving beyond that, आइए RPA के beyond में हम कैसे जा सकते हैं? If we talk about, so like, I'm just taking one example without coming to this slide. So I'll come to this slide after later on. So like in case of SOP, suppose if you have given as an SOP, so in that case, if you see into the SOP, there's a 500 pages SOP, and you need to review that SOP, and you have to comment that, yes, what are the possible factors, what are the gaps into the SOP itself. Reading manually and finding out the gaps into that 500 pages SOP is quite difficult task, and it will take too much time. But nowadays there's a lot of softwares, consulting firms, even the big into the market also. There's a lot of softwares is available who scan that particular SAP. You have to upload the scan copy of the SOP, and that they will give you the, based on the algorithm, you just set out that what are the exceptions you require, and that the system itself will give you that exceptions. And then like OCR and ICR technology, which is very, you can recognize any of the content or information from the image scan. Chatbot or voice bot. So like in the chatbot or voice bot, I have already told you this one is thing. And now the part is in the predictive analysis based on the past data. What is the benefits? That there's a workforce evaluation, there will be scalability, that your entire employee value propositions, operational efficiency will be there, and you will be operated to the market. You can take the strategic decision on a real-time basis. And it's a so let's take one example, real-time insights to the support to the next generation enterprise, how it is helping. So the current state is like that. It's a business cumbersome with a greater focus on a manual interaction and a transaction processing. So like it's a insights and actions, reporting and compliance, transaction processing. And if we talk about optimize, what should be the ideal? Automation and business process engineering, driving productivity, efficiency, and establishing the foundation to support the future intelligent technology adoption. इसका एक सबसे बड़ा example क्या है? So like in the procurement to pay process. So let's take one example that how it is helping, how the automation is helping. So now let's take 5 KPIs, which is very important. That there should not be any duplicate bill booking. There should not be any duplicate bill payments. There should not be any split POs. There should not be any raising of PO at a higher rate if the older PO are open. These things, these KPIs can be set by using the technology, by using the data analytics tool, and you can get the data on a real-time basis, on a daily basis. Now this is helping a lot. But in the current state or in the traditional state, if you are talking about this, so how this was helping? You need to just take out the entire dump. You have to perform the data analytics and just see that, yes, what are the duplicate invoices are there. And if we talk about the artificial intelligence, so like the involvement and what would be the future state of the business? It will be the data-driven intelligence enterprises like B2B or B2C focus. So involvement of the AI along with the deep learning, along with the NLPs, machine learning, emerging technology and analytics. And how AI perform the work. So let's take one example. Or you can say that, yes. So another thing is like a reverse auction or auction process. So there's a portal you have developed a portal, and in that portal, the portal function is to just start the bidding for any particular material or any particular scrap. And the system, how the system will work, you need to just put the quantity of the material which needs to be uh, sold through, you can say, um, e-auction, and you need to just put the base price of that particular material. All the registered customers or prospective customers will start bidding at the predefined time when the bid will open. But simultaneously, that particular system will also bid one by one. At every X rupees or at every X plus 1 rupees, system will start the bidding. This is called as an artificial intelligence one. So that's why we call that trusted digital workforce foundation. I have tried to map here that how the frameworks and accelerators for the automation implementation. So if you see that this is the dashboard, this is the agile dashboard model, this is the governance enterprise center. Nowadays, IFC is also automated. You need to just focus. So you have defined the control, RCM, risk control matrix, and you have to just put the data that these are the control, these are the responsible person. And how it works, at the end of the year, that particular person need to just review the control, and they have to put up the entire data and documents. System will automatically give you the exceptions that yes, these many number of controls are failed, these many number of controls are passed. So these are the things you can say in terms of the digitization. Intelligence automation across industry. So like if you say, so in the finance and accounts, accounts payable and receivable, so I have said you earlier, financial reporting, invoice processing like booking of the invoices through bot, vendor payments, then budgeting and forecasting by using the budget forecasting tools, credit review, GL review and reconciliation. A lot of tools are available into the market for the account reconciliation. Even for the GL also, some of the companies have developed their own tool or own portal for the GL review, and that system will give you the exceptions. In case of operations, the KYCs and client onboarding, this is also automated. So like HRMS tool where the entire things is automated. MIS reporting, there are a lot of tools is available. CRM, that nowadays whereas a lot of CRM portal or CRM software is available into the market, where you can track that how many number of opportunities are open, how many number of opportunities are closed, and at what level that particular CRM is pending. Customer service support. So let's take, so recently I have observed at one of the leading CP, consumer product manufacturing company. So they have very good portal. So how the entire portal is working, they have the portal, and that is every dealer just need to log in onto that particular portal. They have to just log the complaints, and after the complaint login, they have to there's a turnaround time that after that particular turnaround time, if that complaint has not been picked up by that particular authorized service center, the automated populated will go to one level above the particular DOA matrix, and then that is start, and then that particular person will start following up, and after the closure, you need to just put up your feedback that yes, complaint has been closed. Another thing is you can check the entire complaints management database that yes, what is the quality of the complaint, which customer is really doing the complaint, what are the categories of complaint which the company is having into that particular product. So this is about the customer service support. Project compliance reporting, nowadays into the market, a lot of compliance tool is available where you need to just map what all are the compliance are applicable to the company. So you have to, it is a you can say that first you need to assess that what are the compliance applicable to your organization, and you have to just map that these are the organizations, these are the compliance applicable to our organization. And apart from this, you need to just focus what is the turnaround time to complete, and what is the due date to complete that particular database and that particular compliances. And that is being regularly monitored by the portal itself. Portal will give you the pop-ups, portal will give you the notification that why you have not completed that particular task. So companies like Vedanta, companies like ArcelorMittal, companies like JSW, companies like HPC or BPCF. A lot of companies are nowadays using the project compliance monitoring tool. Even one of the tool like Asan, it is also one of the tool which is very useful into the project monitoring. Means even in that tool also, it's in that tool you can also upload the pictures and you can mark that what is the progress of the project. And you can, and at the next time when there is a updation in the project progress, you can update that next picture, and system will give you the differences that what is the progress going on and how many percentage there has been a change. AML checks, IT services, access management. So there's a lot of tools available. So like into the first session that they have covered the information security. So she has covered the information security. So like access management. In case of SOD, nowadays that entire SOD access right is being reviewed by the particular tool itself. And tool will give you the exception that where there is a SOD conflicting issues. Ticket resolution, which I have already told you, then server monitoring, file management, and email related risk. So like email related task, your the entire emails can be automated. That what are the work are pending, which is being due or which is overdue. So like I'll say that into the organization itself, if you have installed a server, email server, then you can easily identify that if any mail goes beyond the organization or outside the organization, you can easily identify what are the emails that is gone. In case of supply chain inventory management, nowadays that robot has been installed to just take out the material from the stores or bin. You have to just, so robot is installed in that way. This is supply planning into the MRP planning. So like in case of MRP, if you have implemented an entire material requirement planning, then you don't need to do or you don't need to calculate manually that what is the requirement of the material for producing this particular product. You need to just put up your sales figure that this quantity you want to sell or you want to sold into the market. In that particular thing, how this will say, system will itself automatically calculate the entire by doing the entire calculation. What is the existing stock is available, then what is the open POs are there, then what is the delivery in pipeline, and at the end of the calculation, the system will populate that these are the exact requirement of the material requirement. But how the auditor will play a role here? Auditor need to just check that whether the system, whatever the workflow has been defined, whether that workflow is working within the that particular configuration or not. Can the configuration be changed by anyone, or who is having that particular access rights? So like in case of the contract management also, so this is the thing. Quote management. If we talk about the quote management, so a lot of big companies, they have developed a portal where they just based on the purchase requisition raised by the purchase user or production department, they will just raise that particular RFQs into the portal itself. And from that portal, when you send the RFQ to the vendors, system or portal will automatically, because that portal will link, if that portal is linked to the SAP or ERP, that portal will automatically give you the data and automatically send that particular mail that yes, there's a opportunity to submit the quotation for this particular material. And you can extract that particular data that for X material, for how many vendors that quotation has been, RFQ mail has been sent. And you can cross check whether if suppose 4 years back, if the order has been given to one customer and post that the work has been stopped, whether the quotation has been given or RFQ mail has been sent to that particular vendor or not. So you need to, auditor just need to extract two data. One is the RFQ data, one is the PO dump data. And they will definitely, you can say that, find out the exceptions where the quotation has mail has not been sent to that particular. And into that quotation, you can just track if the portal is just so much developed, you can track that how many number of the vendor has been submitted the quotation, what is the turnaround time, who has submitted the quotation in last. But if we talk about the manual approach, so over there, how it was working like that. Upon receipt of the purchase requisition, commercial department used to write an email to the lot of vendors, and there might be the high possibility that some of the vendors they missed out to send. And after that, they need to just follow up that kiska mail aaya, nahi aaya, from whom they have received the quotation or not. And there might be a high possibility that if they have received the quotation from the 6 vendors, then there's a possibility that they might miss 1 or 2 vendors. But in case of system or in case of portal, so like I'm just telling you that the real portal or the portal which has been developed by one of the largest steel manufacturing company. So in that database, system will automatically flow that RFQ mail to the vendor, to all the prospective vendors to whom the order has been given. Or if the order has not been given, but if the prospective vendor is registered as a prospective vendor, then that quotation mail was also going to that particular prospective vendor. Work order management, that freight management, entire freight that can be managed through GPS and the implementation of the freight module. You can track out on a real-time basis that whether your vehicle has been raised. Why this is important? This is important to track basically the real time, or you can say that the exact location of that particular vehicle or exact location of that particular truck. And then return processing. So like in case of HR services, like employee onboarding, time and attendance management, administration, reporting, compliance reporting, learning management, leave management, data entry. Earlier, the entire processes were used to be offline. Employee onboarding, they used to submit all the KYC document over mail or they visits to the HR office, company's HR office, they bring out the physical documents and based on that physical document, HR department used to verify and post the verification, they create an employee code or they onboard the employee. But nowadays, HRMS tool is there. You need to, HR department just need to push up that this employee, this is the name of the employee and this is the mail ID. And once they put the mail ID of that particular person, the link to upload the entire data, it's a self-declaration basis. To upload the entire data into the HRMS tool goes to the particular employee. Then that employee log in from their login ID and password and they upload the entire data. This is helping in saving of the documents. This is helping in retention of the document. This is helping in saving of the times. Time and attendance management. Like the biometric nowadays, biometric is also linked with the HRMS tool. You don't need to focus that who is on half day, who has done the overtime, or who has done you can say that half day working or extra working hours. So like the Chronos system, Chronos benefit administration, these all are the things. Payroll management, because if you're for the payroll management, there are two things important. One is the attendance part and second is leave and CTC master. And if the entire things is interlinked, so I think that entire payroll processing can be done online. Auditor just need to focus that where the access rights can be edited or where the controls can be modified or manipulated. So this is the entire thing. This is the just illustrative gist that where the IA automation can be implemented or have been implemented by the client. So like this one, I have already told you that what is the internal audit today, manual effort is spent in the data validation, large number of manual reports, manual tracking of vendor emails and all those things. And if we talk about the emerging, these are the emerging technology. And if we talk about the audit tomorrow, this is the automated data validation and invalid identification. Your IA can create a report in just a minute. So if you see just like nowadays chat GPT is a very hot topic. So I was searching just that what are the risks into that particular processes and what is this, what is that. Chat GPT was giving a lot of answers. And even you can just because it was working on the artificial intelligence model. It is at a L1 level. And nowadays the every day or every week the same thing is being emerging or updating. So this is the future how the audit will be immersed post fully implementation of fully awareness of the digitization. So like IFC control testing today, which I have already covered that earlier we used to test and we used to just fill up the test script and we used to document the entire things. So in this case, but nowadays by using the tool, you need to just upload all the documents over the portal itself. Auditor or the person or the independent internal team itself can vouch that particular controls, whether that control is well in place or not. So this is scope of automation across common audit function. So this is just based on the like data collection into the data entry. So these are the illustrative list where I have tried to map that where the audit functions can be automated. That data collection, if you have, so like I told you that there are a lot of tools is available where just auditor need to put their data requirement and need to map the target date as well as the person responsible to submit the data. And entire data you can obtain from the portal itself. So like data entry, I have again told you sample generation, it can be done through the system itself also, evidence validation, automating testing of the attributes. So like IFC testing, smooth. Risk assessment, then progress tracking through the various dashboard and Google calendars and all those things. Report generation, so like audit committee decks, automatic reporting and templates and all those things. So this is automation, audit control testing automation, how the workflow look likes. So this is the risk control matrix. It is IT enabled, and this is the auditor manual. So like this, in the automation cases, so I have mapped one part is that automation classification of the controls. This is the manual control. That manual control is being tested either through the RPA risk robotic process automation or through the manual testing. But if you talk about the automation, the system configuration of control is well in place, and they will automatically upload the outcomes into the tool. But if we talk about this one, the entire ERP, DMS data, HR system, and other system, they will upload that data into the enforce tool. And after like UiPath, Blue Prism, Automation Anywhere, these are the AI tools. They will perform the testing and they will upload the data here. Auditor need to just review the outcomes of the automated or IT enabled control, and they will just publish the entire report into the dashboard format. What will be the approach for automating the means, if suppose if you are the auditor, and how what will be your approach for automating the audit controls? So like if see I and IFC, the master updation, purchase management and payments. The fraud internal, these are the illustrative list. The duplicate invoices, data accounting, payroll, compliance to the DOA, invoice processing, blocked invoices, payments. These are the categorization of the controls. You need to just design, develop, and user acceptance test. And after performing, these are the and here after the this team, the here the pool of the audit controls will be there. The particular client need to just select the automated controls from the pool, and the intelligence automation team will perform the testing, and then that will be updated into the portal itself. And this is entire things how the same will work. Automating, so this is one of the example that automating configuration control audit for a global steel manufacturer. So like RPA or robotic process automation bot inputs SAP, and this one is board. This one is SAP, this one is board, both are interlinked. RPA board inputs the required T code into the SAP and obtains the table. RP पहले क्या होता था, यहाँ पे पर्सन खुद एक टी कोड डाल करके एसएपी में से रिपोर्ट निकालता था, उसके बाद डेटा एनालिटिक्स परफॉर्म करता था. यहाँ पे क्या है कि जो आरपीए टूल होगा वो दैट आरपीए टूल विल इटसेल्फ put the T code that yes, from this T code they want the report. And after this, bot will enter into the quick view script. And this one is RPA bot applies the filter on the Excel inputs and select configuration control to be tested. And then again, this is a QLIC tool where the entire testing will be performed. And QLIC view generates the output whether the control passed or failed. So this is the real-time database, or you can say that this is the real thing which our team has performed this particular testing. And what the benefits we got? The first of all, we got the benefits is timing. That we saved a lot of time as a part of the project management. We have performed a quite a good number of automated controls, and the number of errors which we were expecting or we have identified into the manual control testing, that entire error has been reduced to zero. So this one is against the thing, again the same thing which I have told you earlier. So these are the illustrative tools and technologies for the audit and control assessment. So like robotic process automation, data analytics tool for the continuous risk assessment, and next is self audit clearances tool, that the lot of checklist is there. So like mobile based application along with the geotagging, and you can just upload that particular evidences in that tool and you will get the entire report. So from the centrally itself, from the centralized location, you can perform the testing without going to the client location. This is about the SPV, scanning and physical verification tool, which is very popular tool now into the market, and to perform the physical verification of the data, or you can say physical verification of any of the plant or inventory or whatever the case may be. So this we have already covered. This is again that tool, that process mining, which is tool, then Enforce tool, then Brain, which is, and these tools are basically used in performing the control testing. Connect tool is basically used in the Big Fours or to share for the data sharing. That in this you can find out the entire data, what is the real time data, what the data has been submitted by the client, and what is the delay. So entire things you can status update you can take from the Connect tool itself. I think I have tried to cover most of the things. So these are the benefits to the digitization. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gaurav sir, for such a wonderful explanation. And now I think we should take questions, sir.
Yes.
First of all, sir, I'm explaining question, sir, and the respective जो speaker हैं sir वो आप अपना देख लेना sir किस हिसाब से right sir. सबसे पहले क्वेश्चन है सर, स्कोप ऑफ इंटरनल ऑडिट इन टुडे सिनेरियो.
ओके.
हाँ, ये क्वेश्चन स्वाति मैम से है आई थिंक ना, स्वाति मैम से.
Thank you.
जी मैम.
So I think the question is a little broad if we want to know more about the overall internal audit scope. I think every organization is now going for 3 line of defense. Earlier it used to be a method that has been implemented for financial organization. But even for tech organization, you will see that there is a IT team which is implementing the control. Second line is the CISO organization, and third line is the internal audit.
Right.
So the scope is actually increasing, and internal audit team is now not only responsible for financial audits, they are also responsible for IT and information security related audits, and they are also being involved for the risk related activities. So I think their scope is expanding in two ways. One, more organizations are actually implementing this function. And within organizations, the scope is getting wider because of the usage of technology and third line of defense that is expected from the internal audits.
Okay. And thank you, ma'am. And next question, ma'am. Some light on alignment of LOD2 and LOD3 function.
Right. So second line of defense, right, that is mostly information security team or so we have to keep these two organizations independent. I mean, the first thing that we are expecting in, or the reason why we have these three lines, that these three has to be independent. There has to be alignment in terms of objectives, but they should not collude, right? And they should use their independence to identify the issues which may be missed by other line of defense. So I think there has to be coordination in terms of activities and getting things done for a common objective. But at the same time, there has to be independence so that there is no collusion and people are able to identify more issues which may be left by other lines.
Okay. And next question, ma'am, whether some allotment of internal audit are based on L1 bids, which is detrimental for quality of audit. Is so?
I'm not. I'll say I'm not experienced or like expert in this domain. The question that is being asked, but based on my understanding so far, that I'll say
Okay.
every line of defense, right, or the alignment need to be done based on the skills, right? For example, if the scope of the audit and the objective is not like aligned with the auditors, right, the gaps will, like, there is possibility that the material findings have been missed. I think those kind of risks exist, but I think someone else can answer this question with more detail.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, Bhupender ji, what was the question?
Question was whether internal audit. No, sir. I think that question is removed right now.
Okay, so I think the question was that whether IA allotment is always based on the L1, correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, sir, to the extent I know or based on my experience, that L1 may be one factor, but yes, even or the skills which is mapping to that particular management, I think that plays a very important role. Sometimes if you don't have that skill or team that don't have that skill and you are L1, that it is not possible that management will give you the IA.
Right, sir. And next question is, sir, um, highlight on ASM audit, highlight on forensic audit.
Is it a question for me?
I don't know, मैम एक्चुअली स्पीकर का नाम रेफर नहीं किया है उन्होंने और आई थिंक इवन स्टार्टिंग का क्वेश्चन है मोस्ट प्रोबेबली आपके लिए इवन क्वेश्चन.
Okay, so I'll explain what is the objective of the forensic audit first. Right? So when we talk about forensic audit, the objective is to identify the root cause, and the core objective again is to collect the evidence which can help in the which can create the chain of events and which can give you uh, evidences which you can prove in the court of law if required. So that is the core objective of the your forensic audits, right? If there is a breach, if there is a fraud, the root cause identification and getting the evidences which can be proven in the code of law based on the objective or what kind of fraud or breaches. Right? While we are talking about a specialized monitoring audit, right? The objective is entirely different. It's more about finding the issues or gaps in the transaction, operations, and financial health of the organization. Forensic audits can also help in the ASM audits, but the objective of these two audits are a little bit different, and they serve different purpose based on for which they have been designed.
Okay. And next question, ma'am, what about going for Rupee over Visa and MasterCard usage? I think this question for Swati, ma'am.
Yes, I can answer that. So Visa and MasterCard, they are international players, right? And they have wider connectivity. So before NPCI was launched in India, NPCI, National Financial Switch for India, is also working as semi-quasi regulator in India, and they have issued this Rupee card. So let me give you one example. So if I have a Rupee card, I have swiped it for domestic transaction in India. That transaction will be completed within India to NPCI. It may not go outside India to Visa and MasterCard. But if I'm swiping Visa card, that will go to Visa and then it will be like routed through them. What is the advantage? NPCI is a kind of made in India and it's a local financial switch. So they may be charging lesser transaction fee and your data remains in India. While in case of Visa and MasterCard, because these are international payment brands, the transaction will go outside and the charges may be higher for the merchants. But again, Visa and MasterCard are also now abiding with the RBI rules. So they are also keeping the data in India and they are trying to protect your data as per the Indian laws.
Okay, ma'am. And next, ma'am, is 100% coverage is possible means collect evidence for each every transaction. Kindly explain 100% population coverage under transformation in yes sir आपके लिए है मिश्रा sir.
Okay. So Dikshit ji, so I was talking about this one, that 100% coverage, how it is being done. So first of all, just to clarify that we are performing as an auditor into this digitization mode. We perform the data analytics into the entire 100% population, and whatever the exceptions we identify from that population, then that exception is being checked on a sample basis.
Okay. Thank you. And next question, sir. What is the best software package for financial internal control? I think this question is for Bhavani ma'am.
I'm not financial internal control.
Ji.
So there's so many packages out there, sir. So
Okay.
I wouldn't want to recommend any particular vendor provider, but I think there are a lot of packages and a lot of Indian-made products as well out there. I would say, yeah.
Okay. That's it, ma'am. I think no more questions are left. I think questions are repeating again and again. So here the question ends, and you have give all the solutions to all the participants. And thank you very much to all the learner speaker of today program. Gyanchand Misra ji, Honorable Central Council member, is not coming. I think he is busy somewhere. So thanks to all the great faculty of today program, ma'am, and Sir Gaurav Misra sir, Swati ma'am, and Bhavani ma'am. I am very privileged to proud कि आपको आज सुनने का मौका मिला. Thanks to all the participants. Thank you and thanks very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bhupinder ji.
Thanks.
Thanks, Bhavani. Thanks, Swati.